plate, dog.
Oh, beauty. Where's it gone? Keep your head down.
Supposed to hit it.
Keep your head down. Head down. Don't take your eye off the ball. Not even after you've hit it.
Just follow the road.
So I found another Easter egg on the Jeep. Come over here. You need to open your bottle. There's a little bottle opener on all of the door handles. Beautiful. Chin chin. Thanks, Jeep. Oh, and thanks, Red Hill. So we're filling up 156.3. So we're going to old style pump. We're up to $50 already. Oops, 56 with tops out. Give a little extra in there. Get it as full as we can. So we've got 37 litres, 57.96. Good. So these are salt plains out here. So you can see all the way out here, salt plains. And this is the route I'm going to be heading down. Hello and welcome to the Steve's Kitchen podcast on the road. We're on real dirt tracks today on the Hayden Norseman, or we're doing the Norseman to Hayden trail. It's a compounded mud sort of gravel track, real sort of outback feel to it. What do you think of it, Michelle?
Yeah, it's good. It's about 297 k's, so just under 300 k's. Reasonably smooth. There was a little bit of bitumen road when we first started, wasn't there? And then it went.
Where we saw, I don't know the name of it. It's like a thorny lizard. He's not moving. It's laying in the middle of the road. I'm going to call it a thorny lizard. I will find out. We have no internet, no phone reception out here for the last day or so, and we managed to find a nice little spot last night off the road. It wasn't a marked stopping trail, but it actually turned out to be a really nice spot.
It's just a track where obviously cars had gone down at some point, and we just went down it a little way and stopped, and then we walked a little bit further.
This is a fascinating road. Ahead of me now, we've just come over the brow of a hill, and as far as I can see into the distance is this sort of reddy brown track leading down between what are lots of eucalypt style trees, so very smooth barked trees, and apparently in this area the soil is predominantly a sand, a combination of a sort of coarse sand and a fine sand. I think it makes up about 80% of the soil. It's really very low in nutrients, so there's no real potassium, there's no nitrates in the soil, and yet as far as we can see to the left and right of us is beautiful trees growing and bushland and shrubs. So clearly it might be void of all the nutrients, but it's good enough for the eucalypts. And Michelle, say a little bit about what you read about the number of eucalypts in this area.
Well, there's about 500 species of eucalypts in the whole of Australia, and this area has 16%, so about 80 different species of eucalypts just in this area alone.
And it's quite noticeable. Where we parked last night, there were just some most beautiful trees. I took some photographs. I'll try and put them up on this podcast or maybe on Facebook. The trees that were around us look almost like a parasitic tree. They're growing, almost morphing around other dead trees, so it's kind of bizarre. You'll see the end of the tree sort of close up and then an old tree sort of spouting out, and there were many different sort of copper colours and green colours. It was just beautiful. What happened?
It was shiny. One of them was shiny, like a copper pipe.
Yeah, it was like a copper pipe, wasn't it? I took a photograph of it because it looked so shiny and coppery. what happened this morning when you woke up, Michelle?
Popped out of the tent and there were 2 kangaroos looking at me. They hopped away pretty quick. Called Steve and they went behind a tree, and then I couldn't see them, so we thought they'd gone. Walked a little bit further along and they were standing looking back at us, and then they turned and hopped off and they were gone, and then we never saw any more. But 2, not too big, they weren't very big, but kangaroos.
So it was interesting because where we stopped, there were signs of animal life. I mean, not far, maybe about 20 feet from the tent where we decided to pitch, there was some animal droppings, but they were really large, and we kind of tried to debate whether they were too big for kangaroos, whether they might have been camel. It was difficult to tell. So what night is this, Michelle? How many nights are we in?
7.
7 nights in. We come way off the Nullarbor. We're way out in the bush now. I mean, these are dirt roads. There's some big droppings here. I'm not sure if that's camel droppings. It doesn't look like cow. It could be camel droppings. I don't think it's roo. Well, I know it's not roo.
Too big for roo.
Reckon so, anyway.
And it's not the right sort for cow.
So we're going to set up tonight. Little parrots are coming in. Are they budgerigars? No, I'm not sure if budgies are down this way. Trees are fascinating. Have a look at this tree over here. It's almost like it's grafted itself. It's a parasitic tree maybe, or... Oh, big ants there. So it's grafted itself, or it started to grow out of an old tree. So the ground looks reasonably flat, so I think we'll be good. Almost like giant gerbil droppings. So we're not sure. There was also some interesting tracks on the ground around us. Now, we couldn't decide what they were. They were definitely the shape of a horse hoof, so they were a round footprint, sort of with almost like a horse hoof, but if you can imagine, a lot smaller. Now, deer don't make that sort of tracking. Kangaroos definitely don't make it, and camels, which are in the area, I'm pretty sure camels have 2 toes, so they wouldn't make that sort of marking. It looked like a very small pony with a shoe on almost had made the mark, but I can't. We're going to have to research it and find out.
Which we couldn't do last night because we had no internet.
We had no internet for, this is the second day of no internet and no connection, so nobody can get in touch with us, which is quite nice in a way, but I don't know when we'll be able to get back online to share any information about our whereabouts, but I'm sure nobody will be too worried.
Before we stopped last night, we stopped at a place called Disappointment Rock. Weren't quite sure what it was going to be, but it was quite nice to climb up the rock.
What you never have known, and can you ache for a place that was never?
I'm just about to see our yellow Jeep next to the green dunny, way down there.
To burn up or fizzle alone. Can you know who inhabits your skin? And can you trust that you won't blow away in the wind? Do you tether your hopes or let go of the ropes in the hope that you someday descend? Just follow the road, the blood in your veins.
Yeah, it wasn't a disappointment, was it?
No, it wasn't. There was a trail around the rock. I've got a leaflet and it said there was a trail you could follow, you know, do certain things. It was about 2 Ks, but we just went straight up the rock.
So it was like, if you can imagine, like a sort of miniature Ayers Rock, but not really with the barren land around it. It was just a big obelisk sticking out of the ground, a big solid piece of rock, and we just walked up. Once you got to the actual top, the views were just remarkable. From almost any direction that you cared to look, there was nothing but the tops of eucalypt trees for thousands of miles, it looked like, which was really quite isolated and quite pleasant to look at. There was I don't think there was a break in the canopy, was there?
I don't think so, no. Because there are lakes around here, or lake flats, but they're not very full of water because they obviously haven't had a lot of rain. But we've come across huge areas of lake, but up upon Disappointment Rock it was all trees, I believe.
Not a disappointment at all. Well worth the very short climb to the top of the rocks. And apologise if it's a bit noisy. You can imagine we're on unmade roads at the moment. The car is getting covered in a sort of like a film of red Outback dust, which is getting in everywhere. We met a young couple travelling. The names were Clint and
Danielle,
and they were travelling with 3 children. It was interesting. We were just past Disappointment Rock, or where we stopped last night. There was a young couple with 3 children travelling from Perth back to their home in Tasmania, and it reminded us a lot of when Michelle and I travelled with our children when they were that sort of age, and we travelled for quite a number of years. And I think discussing it with that couple there, they were quite inspired maybe to go off and do their own sort of travelling. Travelling certainly never did us any harm. And at the beginning of this trail, before we set off the Norseman to Hyden, which is where we're heading to, which is a place called Wave Rock. Now, Clint just told us, the guy we met, that Wave Rock was a little bit of a disappointment, so we will see what it's like. But Norseman was not a disappointment either, not getting the word disappointment as often as possible into the podcast, but Norseman was a beautiful little town. I believe the population is about 700 people, so the lady in the IGA told me, but at one time it was quite a few thousand people, so it's a sizable town, but depreciating because it's so isolated. But what a pretty town, and it's got quite an interesting story behind the name of Norseman. Flies are still with us. We have arrived in Norseman. Now, Norseman always fascinated me because just the name of it, you know, it's the Norse, Scandinavians, and you kind of wonder where the connection between a town called Norseman, way out here in Western Australia, I think we are now, not a long way from Esperance. But I just had a little chat with a lady here in the information centre, and it's a nice town. It's got good stores, good shops in here, lovely people. They've also got, by the way, showers if I wanted to. I'm not going to take a shower today. I've got showers and bathrooms over here. So really well maintained public toilets. But the lady was saying me a guy by the name of Sinclair from the Shetland Isles in Scotland. I have a few friends from Shetland, from the Shetland Isles. Arrived here, I'm not sure the dates, I'll try and put it up on the screen if I can find out, but he arrived here at Esperance and he had a pony with him, and he rode up prospecting for gold. I think he was prospecting, at least he certainly found gold. We arrived here at Norseman. There's a hill up behind us here, and the hoof of the horse was a little bit lame, and he got a bit of stone, a bit of cork. She said cork, I'm not sure how that would be, but there was something in his hoof, and so he worked it out with a little knife, and he found that it was actually containing a small piece of gold. So he put down roots here and started digging for gold, and that's his horse, because he came from the Shetland Isles, and because they have quite a history with the Norsemen. He named the horse Norseman. I think it had a double-barreled name, but it became known as Norseman. So the town was named after the horse that found the gold, the first piece of gold in the area. And so all of the street signs, see over here, this is Robert Street. So this street here, Sinclair Street, is actually named after Sinclair, who was the person that discovered and named Norseman, or was the horse was named after. And Robert Street, also they've got each of them have got the horse on there with the hoof and that little gold nugget. So it's pretty fascinating. So we're about to head off down the Hayden Trail. This is about 200 or 300 kilometers to Wave Rock. And it's an unmade road, but I really love Norseman. It's a lovely little town, great people, really friendly. Got to say a big thank you to Judy in the information centre. She was super sweet, super helpful. So if you ever get the chance to visit Norseman, pop into the information centre, say hello to Judy, and it's well worth a visit. And there are 2, 3, maybe 4 small motels in the town, so you can always stop over. We were camping, so we camped a little bit outside, but I think it was a really pretty historic town, and well worth dropping in. As I say, now we're driving on an unmade track between Norseman and Wave Rock,
which I had seen on Google Maps, but every time I put in to get to Wave Rock, it took us round the coast or inland and round to it, but this road went all the way through. So Steve asked Judy about it, and she said, yep, it's a good road, you can drive it. So we're driving it, and it's good.
Well, it's quite a few 100 kilometers shorter, isn't it? And
yeah, it was 550 kilometers to go round, or 300 kilometers to go through. So
we thought we'd rather go the shorter distance, and the lady in the information, Judy, said it was fine. So here we are now on this dirt track, and it's a little rougher, but it's not anything too treacherous. Where we stopped last night, we had to drive into the bush a little bit. That was probably a little more sort of softer ground up and down, but no real issues. And we had some really nice walks last night, actually, and this morning. Just looking to see if we could see any more kangaroos or any other.
We're looking for koalas, because there's lots of eucalypt trees but no koalas.
We thought we might see koalas. There probably would be koalas somewhere, but we haven't spotted them yet. They're very hard to spot, koalas. They're very solitary, very quiet animals, spend a lot of time sleeping in the trees. So yes, we haven't spotted them yet. We have seen kangaroos. We haven't seen the camels or the emus.
So lots of pretty birds.
Birds were gorgeous. I've tried to photograph them, but it's very hard. We haven't got the high telescopic lenses, so we haven't been able to get them. But there's some very pretty birds in the trees around us, and the trees themselves were just gorgeous, and the scenery, I think, in general. Also, sort of looking at the tracks, I could actually see the kangaroo tracks that had come through the camp where we were, and I was fascinated to actually pace out the kangaroo tracks. So you can see with kangaroos, they land on 2 feet and then jump and bound forward and land again on 2 feet. Now you wouldn't necessarily presume that they take a particularly large jump, and I don't think these were particularly big kangaroos, but I paced out 6 paces between one hop and the next hop. So I would say somewhere around about maybe 4 meters, maybe 5 meters between hops, and I paced that 2 or 3 times just to sort of see. So it's interesting, and these kangaroos, these hop prints were between some of the most awkward little bits of bush and trees, so they really motor through the bush, and they're very accurate, it seems. They must be able to see quite some distance ahead of them and calculate where they've got to land for the next hop. Because quite often the hops were right next to very sort of rough bush and big trees. Now as I'm talking, the road's got a little bit rougher, and now we seem to be bending between sort of fairly low height eucalypt trees and lots of shrub and bushland. Clint told us the road is going to get a little rougher towards the end of our journey. We call it here in Australia corrugated roads, where they ruffle or sort of vibrate pretty aggressively, so that's yet to come. There's a truck. It says beware of of road trains. So there are actually road trains, huge long trucks with maybe 3-4 articulated units. So there's signs here saying we did see one road train in the distance, but I haven't seen another vehicle all morning actually on the road. So that's how busy it is out here, pretty quiet. So we've got many kilometers to go, a good few hundred kilometers before we get, well, possibly, was it 200 kilometers to our destination? You do have to be careful out here that you have enough fuel to get from point A to point B, because you're not going to get many opportunities to get gas, petrol, diesel, whatever it is you require. Now this stretch of road's a lot dustier than the earlier stretch, probably because we're near to the mine. So behind me there's a plume of dust in the air, which means the poor old car will be getting even more dirty. We haven't cleaned it since we set off, so it's looking quite chalky at the moment, which is all good. Now, what was the lake that we stopped at today, Michelle?
Well, there's a couple of lakes. I think it was Lake Johnston.
That's where we filmed with the drone?
Yeah, I think so.
It's fascinating because these lakes, they mostly dried up and they leave like, looks to be like a salt, so they look like salt lakes, but the surface is quite soft. We walked out onto it and you can see that several cars have driven out onto the lake, and I don't think it's that firm, so you'd need to have pretty good four-wheel drive to drive onto the lake. I think one of the most fascinating things to the right and left, I'm starting to see evidence of it again actually, is the fires that have been out in the bush here. Maybe in the last 12 months or so they've had some fairly heavy fires, because a little earlier, before the Disappointment Rock, there was a huge, maybe 50-100 kilometer stretch of burnt trees, and you could actually still smell sort of burnt wood in the air. So all this bushland here has had fires, and you can smell it as you're driving around. Not sure when they had the fires. I wouldn't think it's that long ago. There's still quite a bit of ash on the ground. Look at the soil. I mean, it's a very nutrient poor soil. For a soil that's highly acidic, it's got, I believe, aluminium poison in it, or it's aluminium toxic. So it's really not the sort of land that you can grow most plants in. And yet all around here, although we've had this fiery devastation, you can see here already these coarse tendrils are coming up of new plant life. Can you see just how burnt that piece of wood is? Completely burnt, but underneath here there's a beautiful, I'm not sure if this is a wattle, somebody more knowledgeable than me could tell, but this is another plant that's coming up. Over here, see the carbon on here? These are almost metallic. They've got a sort of metallic rustle to them. And again, signs of growth, new growth coming up. There's somewhere in the region of 16% of the eucalypt trees of all Australia grow in this area, in this region. All of these trees that have been so damaged by the fires, they're different. They've got different rootstocks. I have no doubt at all that this carbonized tree that's here will grow back. You look just underneath the carbon, there's still life. Just peel that back. There is still life in this tree. What causes the fires, Michelle?
Well, I've read that it's most, if not all, of the fires are caused by lightning. So it's not really, they're not man-made, not people leaving burning embers or anything. It's lightning.
So yes, generally against popular belief that it's caused by human activity. A lot of these big bushfires are started by lightning. So I suspect over many thousands of years that the nature and the flora in the area has learnt to adapt to bushfires. And I'm pretty sure that most of the actual land that we're driving past at the moment is completely naturally formed rather than being cultivated by humans. It looks very, very natural, apart from this road that we're driving on, which is really just a big long gravel road through the middle of the bush.
Well, they say this area hasn't had domesticated cattle and sheep and farmed on it because of lack of water. So it's all naturally forming landscapes, and it hasn't had the human habitation because there's no water here. There's no underwater bores or caves or anything. So it's a very harsh environment for humans to live in. But the trees and bushes seem to survive.
Back on the Nullarbor, I think there's a lot of underwater rivers and caves with lots of water, so there are many bores. Now we've just come to the top of a hill again, and I can see for what looks to be 100 kilometers or more of road ahead of us, with nothing on it at all. It vanishes into the distance. It's not a straight road, it's got some sort of bends and curves in it, but it does look a long way off.
We keep seeing signs that say thank you for driving slowly through the roadworks area, but we never see the start of the roadworks. So they don't seem to have the signs up saying you're going into an area where they're working on the road, but we get thanked anyway.
Well, to be honest, the whole road looks like a roadwork. So, you know, when you do get to an area where they sort of technically you could be, because there's maybe a few bollards or things, the road doesn't get any worse. So you have to drive pretty much the same speed all the time, and we're driving between sort of 70 and 90 kilometers an hour, depending on visibility and the state of the roads. The one car we did pass this morning was hammering along here at a great speed and caused quite a plume. That's going to happen occasionally, but mostly people are driving fairly respectably, and they'll just give you a wave as you pass them. We haven't seen a car for probably an hour or so, I would imagine.
Oh, at least. There'll be no quicker going this way, it's just a shorter route, because we can't go as fast as you would on the hard roads. But I think we're seeing definitely a prettier and different landscape.
It is certainly a lot more interesting driving out here in the Outback than it would have been driving on the hard top down to Esperance. So I'm kind of pleased we came this way. So with a good few 100 kilometers traveled and another 100 or two to finish before the end of today, I think we're just going to sign off in this podcast. We've just made a few mental notes of what we've been up to over the last 24 hours. And I hope wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful time and a great life adventure. Be good, and we'll talk to you very shortly.
Bye.
Bye.
If you follow the road till it leads you back home, you'll find that the answer is yes.